It doesn't sound like you want to hear them. Do you want to know our top 6 contestants?
And no Steve Harvey moments today. All right.
Laura, let's be nice to Mr. Vietfest.
I know. It's okay. I still love you guys. All right, go ahead.
All right, guys. Would you guys like to hold hands?
You want to hold hands? Yeah. All right, when your name is announced, let go and step forward, okay?
All right, so the first member of our top 6 is contestant number 3, Kylie Wiggs.
And the next girl to join our top 6 is contestant number 4, Brittany Wayne.
Our next member of our top 6 is contestant number 2, Dinah Legg.
Our next contestant in the top 6 is contestant number 7, Ashley Wade.
Our next contestant, who is going to make it to our top 6, is contestant number 5, Lynn Toomey.
You good?
I'm great.
And last but not least, to join the top 6 is contestant number 1, Deanna Morgan. All right. Ladies, can you join the back of the line again?
And contestant number 1 is going to be staying on stage to do her her final question.
Yeah, her final question.
So ladies, come down.
Ladies, you can exit the stage. Anna and Tin and Jenny. Alright, everyone! Now for my favorite part of the night, the on-stage question and answer. And everyone, I'm going to need all of you all to please listen. During this part, please be quiet because we want the judges to hear the contestants' answers. So please keep your screams, yelling, cheering to minimum, and just please applause, warm round of applause after the contestant is done, just so that the judges can hear the answer. So please be quiet, and just so you know, all the contestants, the other 5 contestants, are going to be in that building, and they will not be able to hear the final question.
Dạ, kính thưa quý vị, phần kế tiếp là phần Q&A. Chúng tôi xin phép quý vị giữ sự yên lặng để ban giám khảo có thể nghe rõ câu trả lời của mỗi thí sinh. Và trong phần này thì những thí sinh khác ở trong phòng kia sẽ không nghe được câu hỏi của thí sinh, cho nên thì rất là rõ ràng và fair.
All right, Deanna, how are you feeling tonight?
Very anxious, to be honest.
Oh, you look beautiful.
Thank you so much.
So Deanna, I'm going to read the question to you in English 2 times, and then Mr. Din will translate in Vietnamese for you. How has living during the global pandemic affected the way you see yourself as a Vietnamese American? How has living during the global pandemic affected the way you see yourself as a Vietnamese American?
Cuộc sống trong đại dịch toàn cầu ảnh hưởng như thế nào đến cách em tự nhìn nhận mình là người Mỹ gốc Việt?
Thank you for the question. So as a Vietnamese American, I feel as though the Vietnamese community in general has a hard time speaking about mental health issues. And during the pandemic, I constantly struggled with severe depression and generalized anxiety disorder. And being shut away from my friends, my family, school, jobs, opportunities, it really led me to be at a halt, because I've always been the type of person to kind of just go out there and get what I want to achieve. But slowing down, it made me think and reflect a lot on who I was personally. I used to struggle a lot with my own heritage and culture, and being in a very not Vietnamese American dominant community, I never saw the types of cultures unless I was visiting my grandparents, so my ông bà ngoại. And when the pandemic happened, I stopped being around my culture, my heritage. So I used to journal a lot and reflect on who I was as a person. I became a person who was able to understand what I felt emotionally and internally, and really reflected on what I wanted to do for the Vietnamese American community, and spread that mental health issues are something that should be talked about in the Vietnamese American community. Thank you.
Thank you. Câu trả lời của em rất là đầy đủ và dài, rất khó cho anh để dịch hết, nhưng mà anh sẽ cố gắng. Dạ, xin lỗi quý vị.
How are you feeling tonight?
I'm feeling very nervous but excited.
Great, congrats on making to the top 6.
Thank you so much.
So I'm going to read the question, final question to you 2 times in English, and then we'll translate it into Vietnamese, okay?
Yes, ma'am.
All right. How has living during the global pandemic affected the way you see yourself as a Vietnamese American? How has living during the global pandemic affected the way you see yourself as a Vietnamese American?
Cuộc sống trong đại dịch toàn cầu ảnh hưởng như thế nào đến cách em tự nhìn nhận mình là người Mỹ gốc Việt?
As a Vietnamese American in a global pandemic, of course I was inside the whole time, just not getting sick, but I did experience a lot of Vietnamese food and maybe learning with my grandma about Vietnamese culture and all the Vietnamese food. Of course, the Vietnamese Facebook posts my grandma would give me, I'd be learning more about Vietnamese culture, because I've had a lot of time on my plate with the pandemic and no school. And I also want to be deeper into the culture, because I'm an American, a Vietnamese American who has not lived in Vietnam, so I don't know. So to not know my language and to not be able to speak clearly, or sometimes not understand other Vietnamese people, is kind of hard. So getting to know my roots and understanding my culture and practicing my polite, elegant etiquettes is very useful. And yeah, I feel like I just improved on my roots a lot more, and I've been learning a lot about my own country.
Trong cái mùa dịch này.
How are you?
Hi Jenny, I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm doing well, thank you. Congrats on making to the final 6.
Thank you so much.
So for now, the question and answer, I'm going to read the question to you in English 2 times, and then we'll translate it into Vietnamese, okay? Are you ready?
I'm ready.
Perfect. How has living during the global pandemic affected the way you see yourself as a Vietnamese American? How has living during the global pandemic affected the way you see yourself as a Vietnamese American?
Cuộc sống trong đại dịch toàn cầu ảnh hưởng như thế nào đến cách em tự nhìn nhận mình là người Mỹ gốc Việt?
So, growing up in Central Virginia in a predominantly white community, I usually felt pretty isolated as a Vietnamese American. So when the pandemic came and a lot of events and organizations moved online, that actually made my world a little smaller, and it enabled me to access people and opportunities that I wouldn't have necessarily have had access to before. Thank you.
Hi Brittany, how are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Good. You look beautiful tonight, and congrats on making it to the final 6.
Thank you.
So I'm going to read the question to you 2 times in English, and then we'll translate into Vietnamese, okay? Perfect. How has living during the global pandemic affected the way you see yourself as a Vietnamese American? How has living during the global pandemic affected the way you see yourself as a Vietnamese American?
Cuộc sống trong đại dịch toàn cầu ảnh hưởng như thế nào đến cách nhìn nhận của em là người Mỹ gốc Việt?
During the COVID-19 pandemic, when school was closed and many people were unavailable and afraid to work, especially those in the healthcare field. However, I did, and that moment completely changed my whole entire life. From someone who has always loved to receive to someone who is willing to share and give back, I found more fulfillment and happiness in doing so. And I believe that I could carry this aspect to be the next Miss Vietfest and represent the Vietnamese American, because I would like to share my experience and teach the younger youth about the happiness of sharing and giving and having a positive outlook, especially in the chaos of the world right now where people have become so disconnected. There's a lack of socialization, communication, compassion, and most importantly, respect and understanding for each other. And I believe that if we can teach the younger youth about giving than receiving, then we can create a more positive and kinder world. Thank you.
Trong cái đại dịch này,
We have contestant number 5, Lynn Toomey. Hi Lynn, how are you?
Well, thank you very much.
Congrats on making it to the top 6. For the final question, I'm going to read it to you in English 2 times, and then I'm going to translate it to Vietnamese, okay? Sounds great. How has living during the global pandemic affected the way you see yourself as a Vietnamese American? How has living during the global pandemic affected the way you see yourself as a Vietnamese American?
cuộc sống trong đại dịch toàn cầu ảnh hưởng như thế nào về cách nhìn tự nhận của em là người Mỹ gốc Việt?
Thank you for your question. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Good evening, judges. I remember watching the news during the pandemic. I know it might sound controversial, but I know many people blame Asian Americans for COVID during the pandemic. And I remember it was just heartbreaking watching the news. But it made me realize that I miss my Vietnamese roots. I want to reconnect with my culture because growing up in Baltimore, Maryland, there was no Vietnamese community. And watching the news and how people perceive us as a cause for COVID, it just was really heartbreaking. So for me, during the pandemic, I would read about Vietnam, history about Vietnam, just so that I can regain my sense of identity living in America, because I lost out touch. And being here at Vietfest for the first time made me realize how important culture and tradition, and I want to preserve it, because traditions and cultures give us a sense of belonging and security, because it can be isolating for us as a minority. And therefore, if I were to win Miss Vietfest, I would do everything I can to keep this tradition going on for many years to come. Thank you. Xin cảm ơn.
Cảm ơn em. Câu trả lời rất là hay, hơi khó cho anh nha, anh sẽ cố gắng.
Nervous.
Nervous. Don't need to be nervous. All right, Abigail. So I'm going to read the question to you in English 2 times, and then we'll translate to Vietnamese. Okay?
Yes.
Awesome. How has living during the global pandemic affected the way you see yourself as a Vietnamese American? How has living during the global pandemic affected the way you see yourself as a Vietnamese American?
Cuộc sống trong đại dịch toàn cầu ảnh hưởng như thế nào đến cách nhìn nhận của em là người Mỹ gốc Việt?
For me, I think as a Vietnamese American, as a community, we've always been very resistant and persistent. Personally, for me, I see a lot of Asian hate that happened after COVID, and it touched my heart how Vietfest came together. I believe when I was doing research for Vietfest, we had a guest singer, and listening to one of her songs touched me personally, because her song was about stop the Asian hate. And I would say thank you.
Cái điểm quan trọng nhất của câu trả lời của em mà nó luôn mang đến em đó là hãy ngưng sự ganh ghét về người châu Á, tại vì Covid là lý do. Cảm ơn em.
Hi Ashley, how are you?
I'm good, how are you?
I'm doing well, thank you. Congrats on making it to the final round. I'm going to read the question to you in English twice, and then we'll translate to Vietnamese, okay? How has living during the global pandemic affected the way you see yourself as a Vietnamese American? How has living during the global pandemic affected the way you see yourself as a Vietnamese American?
What I've learned from being in a pandemic is that I want to push myself more into being more authentic and showing where I'm from. I've been lucky to have a really good childhood with both of my cultures. So I'm half Vietnamese, my dad is Vietnamese, and my mom is Thai. And since I was little, my parents made sure that I would never lose my roots. And since then, and then the pandemic happened, I really just wanted to put myself out there and show that there were other girls like me who were half Vietnamese and half Thai, that you can do anything you want. And that's why I chose to do a K-pop trainee audition, and I was so lucky that I made it. And due to the pandemic, I could not move to Korea to finish my training, but with that, I gained more confidence to dance, and since then, I've been able to teach dance workshops and just pursue my career as a dancer. At 16, I got to teach a post-collegiate dance workshop, and you know, showing my Vietnamese culture through it was just amazing, and I hope to keep pursuing that through dance. Thank you.
Welcome to the final round. I'm going to read the question to you 2 times in English, and then we'll translate to Vietnamese, okay?
Okay.
Awesome. How has living during the global pandemic affected the way you see yourself as a Vietnamese American? How has living during the global pandemic affected the way you see yourself as a Vietnamese American?
Cuộc sống trong đại dịch toàn cầu ảnh hưởng như thế nào về cách nhìn của em khi mình là người Mỹ gốc Việt?
The pandemic has affected my outlook that I realized that I play a crucial role in the next generation of Vietnamese American. Due to the social distancing and we are unable to visit our family and friends, not just within the States, but our family and friends in Vietnam. There's a lack of connections, and as you all know, there's already a generational gap and a cultural gap between the first, second, and third generation. Personally, I'm a 1.5 gen. I don't understand the struggle as someone who's older, who grew up and had to get jobs when they first come to America, but I don't understand the struggle as a second gen. So as someone who's now growing up in DC and learning more about the society, I realize that it's my job to bridge the gap between the generations despite the COVID through interactive activities. For example, during college, I hosted Viet 101 online, where I taught my peers from NC State University to learn Vietnamese. I thought it was for students only, but we had a couple of adults in the community who came out because they're like, oh, I was a veteran in the Vietnam War and I would like to get in touch with the experience again, and I would want to learn more about Vietnam and Vietnamese itself. And that's how the COVID pandemic has affected my view outlook as a Vietnamese American. Thank you.
Wow, you put me on the spot. Very hard. Kính quý vị ơi, câu trả lời quá là hay mà dài quá.
Tina, how are you feeling?
I'm feeling great. How are you feeling?
I'm feeling so proud of each and every one of you. Welcome to the final round. So I'm going to ask you the question in English 2 times, and then we'll translate it into Vietnamese, okay?
Sounds good.
How has living during the global pandemic affected the way you see yourself as a Vietnamese American? How has living during the global pandemic affected the way you see yourself as a Vietnamese American?
Cuộc sống trong đại dịch toàn cầu ảnh hưởng như thế nào về cách nhìn của em khi là người Mỹ gốc Việt?
how I view myself during the pandemic is someone who is looking to connect people even though we are far apart from each other. Before the pandemic, I was very involved in VSA, would love going to festivals, and also just connecting with my friends in general. It was hard to do so because we had to be apart from one another, and I loved being in person with them because we would be able to learn, cultivate relationships, and also network as well. But I realized that throughout all of this, distance makes the heart grow fonder, and that we should find ways to connect it. I saw a lot of leaders step up to find ways that we can teach the youth more about the Vietnamese community. When we were out of not having festivals, I was able to connect with other people that I haven't before because it was an easier way to do so when I would just pick up the phone. So although I'm a very social person and I miss that aspect, it made me want to connect with people further. And after the pandemic, I make a more conscious effort to spend time with the people I love when I have the chance to do so. Thank you.
Qua cuộc dịch này,